The fog of the biggest doormat. Hi all. My wife of 9 years and 3 children had an affair starting with a one-night thing at the beginning of March 2021. That later developed online and eventually in person into a full-blown true unconditional love, soulmates. Most emotionally intimate ever physical affair. The OM is married, reasonably happily enough to fear exposure. Lives halfway across the country. And is also working with my wife on a legal case. They are both attorneys. Basically, they both knew their relationship would never be more than it was at the time. Frequent, intimate, physical. Mutually supportive messaging with occasional thing for a day or two out of town, coinciding with business. Our marriage was definitely troubled prior to the affair. And no, that's not just her opinion. I had been depressed for several years and had been a less than stellar partner and stay-at-home dad. Our intimacy levels had tanked, and our physical life, while not infrequent, averaging once a week over the last 3 years, was beset with issues of high desire, low desire, pressure for intimacy from me, something I know now was deeply destructive and moronic on my part, and very little emotional intimacy in the bedroom. However, my WW did a frankly crappy job of communicating her unhappiness, loneliness, frustration with me, mainly because, as she explains now, she was in deep denial herself and was just going along in cruise control in the marriage, not bothering to analyze her feelings about me or the marriage. When she did talk with me or about me and my issues, she explained her position in terms of her heartfelt concern for me and her desire to see me get better and get busy doing something that I find fulfilling that will make me happy. She never expressed any resentment or impatience or weakening of her commitment to the marriage. Anyways, D-Day for me was May 3rd, 2 months after it started. I just walked into it via her iPad, which I picked up because the battery in mine was dead. I turn it on, enter the password, which I created for her. A recurring theme in this story, and up popped a long chain of messages back and forth on my wife's cloud-based legal practice management webpage. The first message I saw was from my WW, 50 years with you would not be enough for me. Ouch. Scanning back over the messages was an education in betrayal and deceit and manipulation and, from her perspective, intense, unconditional, mutual love, along with intense lust. I don't know how many BSs have had the unfortunate privilege of having their WS affair written up in dirty detail, almost from the beginning, but I can say for certain that it made D-Day that much more painful. I didn't get a chance to save most of the conversations before my wife came looking for her iPad and I had to confront her. And fortunately, her response to my discovery was stonewalling, protecting the intimacy of her affair, and her claiming, as so many WSs before her, that there were bigger problems than the affair, which happened because her commitment to the marriage was very weak. Ironically, a couple of weeks prior to D-Day, my wife decided we would benefit from marriage counseling, and we were to have our first meeting 4 days after D-Day. She retreated and talked to her best friend, who told her she thought my WS had been unhappy with me for years. She then came back the next day and said that she was done with date nights with me, all the hostility, demands for intimacy, or details about the affair. She said she would need an environment of acceptance and vulnerability. She later wrote that she actually was prepared to accept that she wouldn't have my trust again. Missing was much of any remorse for her betrayal and deceit. Yeah, she said she was sorry about the lies, but that's about it. Needless to say, her reaction was about the worst-case scenario to me exposing her affair. The hostility of which she speaks was only present after D-Day, although it would continue for weeks as she continued to stonewall and I continued to vent. In retrospect, I wish I had outed the other man to his wife right away. I wasn't sure at first how that would affect her client, and there was an issue of privileged info. But it could have been done. I know, dumb. I let myself fear for my marriage and let my wife basically threaten divorce if I exposed the other man or if I insisted on what she called demands for emotional intimacy, like demands for transparency about the affair. She claimed that she didn't have emotional trust in me, and she feared that if she opened up, that I would manipulate her or intentionally hurt her. Anyways, we went to a couple of marriage counselor meetings before she called me after her solo meeting and said that we needed a new counselor. Lots of reasons were given, but the one that stuck with me is the counselor told her that in a marriage, you can have trust or privacy, but not both. That was unacceptable to her. So we had to get a new counselor. Second counselor, recommended by a friend of hers, was much more sympathetic with WS, even going so far as to say it was understandable that my WS was still in contact with the other man, because our marriage is a desert and her affair is an oasis, and she is rightfully fearful of jumping back into the desert. After a few sessions with her, along with her kicking me out of a session and saying unequivocally that I had a certain personality disorder which I did not have, and which I refuted point by point in an email. I had to stop our sessions with that counselor. And now we are going to start with counselor number 3. Actually, number 3 would have been number 1, but she had been out of town at the time. A few days after D-Day, my wife told me that she had friended the other man, by which she meant she had given him the "let's just be friends" speech, and he agreed to give us distance while we sorted through our issues. She proposed a 30-day freeze in all contact with the other man and counseling twice a week, then reevaluate where she stood after 30 days. I told her 30 days was hardly enough, and we both agreed to leave the particulars of our counseling effort to the counselor. Her rejection of one counselor nipped that idea in the bud. I didn't believe my wife's story about now being just friends with the other man, and I was repeatedly asking her to tell the truth because I could tell she was lying. She complained that my hostility and pushiness were doing more damage to her commitment to our marriage than the intimacy issues that precipitated her affair. I told her that her views of our marriage were suddenly, post-D-Day, much more negative, and that it seemed incongruous with her view of the marriage from even a month or two earlier. She wrote to the other man early on in the affair that I have never regretted marrying my spouse, and I wouldn't imagine ever leaving him. The things he gives to me are things that someone that's too much like myself could never give to me. Even 6 days before D-Day. She says that BS is actually doing better than he has in a long time. He's lost 17 pounds. He's had more self-awareness lately than I can ever remember. However, as her love affair with the other man became more and more intense and passionate, and emotionally intimate, as she fell deeper in lust with him, her views of me and our marriage became less and less enthusiastic. Especially physically, she started to become repulsed by me, and could only sleep with me if she had few drinks, or if the lights were out and she fantasized about him. It wasn't just me she didn't want near her. She wrote to the other man a few weeks before D-Day that she had lost interest in one-night stands and other men simply because they could no longer compare to you. A few days later she said to the other man that I think it would make me physically sick to sleep with a particular guy she liked in the past. It's one thing to think that I'm not interested in a one-night stand, but a little disturbing for me to actually be repulsed by the thought of one. You've really changed my life. Clearly, her lust for the other man was making physical or emotional intimacy with anyone else difficult or impossible. Strangely, she claimed that she took pains to ensure that her feelings for the other man were not a product of or intensified by her issue with me and our marriage. She just completely didn't think about the other way around. Further proof of deep affair fog. When I asked her how she thought she could get away with the affair, she said that she believed she wouldn't be caught. This is a convenient self-deception that allowed her to rationalize that if she was never caught, then I would never know. And if I never knew, then I wouldn't be hurt by her affair. But then I did find out and was very hurt, so suddenly her rationalization fell apart. I also asked her how she could have thought that marriage counseling could have been productive while she was carrying on a secret love affair at the same time. She seemed not to be bothered by this contradiction and claimed that she thought it would help us communicate better, help establish better boundaries. The fact that intimacy with anyone but the other man had become repulsive to her didn't seem to concern her. I told her that her sudden pessimistic turn about our marriage was likely cognitive dissonance resolution in action. As is usually the case when you point something like that out, she doubled down on the self-deception. About 2 weeks after D-Day I found that she had changed the password to her old and currently unused personal email account, an account that predated us as a couple, with a password that she had given me, and explained where the password came from. Instant red flag. Later I went to her office. I have a key, and looked on her desktop. I found some possible passwords written down. I got it right on the first try. Lo and behold, the affair had never taken a break, and the other man had never laid off of her. My WS apologized to the other man, saying it was sad that I had invaded their privacy. She mentions the proposed hiatus and expresses that it would be very difficult to make it through the 30 days. 2 days after she had told me that she and the other man were now just friends, they exchanged the most damaging email messages of the entire affair. The other man suggests telling me that he and his wife had an open marriage, so exposure wouldn't bother him. My WS agrees with the idea, admitting it's manipulative, but that she isn't afraid to call a spade a spade. Then he tells her, like you, I am ordinarily an honest person, and I place a very high premium on honesty in my relations with others. But, in the case of you and me, there are few deceptive acts I would not engage in to keep us together. And, I feel no guilt or shame about this. None. My WS replied, Yep, I'm in agreement. It's pretty hard to weasel out of that declaration of deceitful intent, and even harder to figure out a way to get over this and ever be able to trust her again. Needless to say, me finding out about her continued affair and her continued deceit about it kept me pretty hostile with her. But I also knew that I couldn't confront her, as she would immediately react with feeling violated and spied upon. So, for a couple of weeks the stalemate continued. I monitored her emails and saw her and the other man plan a rendezvous on June 1st, when it became clear that she was intent on seeing him in spite of everything I knew and suspected. I just decided I'd had it with her and with the secrecy. And I confronted her with my knowledge of her emails. As predicted, she acted as the violated party and got angry and immediately said she wanted a trial separation, which was fine with me. All through this last 6 weeks, my WS has continued to see her affair as a sign that she was already checked out of the marriage, even though she decided at the time to have a one-night stand in order to tide her over while she waited for me to get better. I think her affair was honestly unplanned, took her by surprise, and she lost control of herself and got carried away with the affair's intense emotional intimacy. She now says she has finally ended her affair but says that she did it because it was necessary prior to separation. Not for me or for our marriage or for the sake of counseling. I sort of believe her, mainly because I can monitor everything she does electronically. She is in occasional contact with him. They still are working on a case, though she has pushed it back for 6 months. They stopped texting and emailing outside of work-related stuff. I think I'm safe in assuming that in spite of the affair ending, my wife is still in the affair fog, right? Perhaps it will never end, in which case divorce is inevitable. She is trying a trial separation within our house, moving into a guest bedroom. She still says she feels emotional stress when she's around me and that she is happier with me not around. She still says that my hostility needs to stop, but I think she feels hostility from me even when I'm not feeling it or saying anything provocative. Is this emotional stress or tension she feels around me her anger and hostility towards me for forcing the affair to end, obliquely, anyways, or is it her guilt or shame at her affair? Mostly unexpressed as of now. Pressing on her subconscious. She claims that she is unable to be empathetic with me because she feels totally threatened by me. She claims she thinks I want to hurt her, which I do not. Do you think I'll be waiting around forever for her to face up to what she has done, or is this more or less a permanent change? I can't believe my previously honest and moral wife has transformed into a sociopath, but her words and actions speak for themselves. While I don't have any illusions about our marriage prospects, I do wonder if the hostility she perceives decreases and counseling, which we are going to continue, gives her a feeling of safety in which to express herself. Is there any chance she will confront what she has done? She says right now she wants counseling in order for us to live together more peacefully for our kids' sake. I agree, and maybe later we could try honest-to-goodness couples counseling. Do you think that later will ever come? Or should I just file for divorce right now? For the sake of my kids, I think of divorce as a last resort. My WS and I haven't been able to do counseling with any consistency. If that has any chance of working, then I'd prefer to wait it out and see what happens. One thing is for sure, if the affair continues at any point, or if she gives up and files for divorce herself, I certainly have a whole hell of a lot of incriminating evidence to expose her affair with, including to the other man's BS. And I won't hesitate at that point to use it. Comments. Get a job. Seriously, no woman likes to support a husband. Even if she was the one who asked you to stay home with the kids, you should have never done so. Women are hardwired through 10,000 years of social indoctrination to be supported and taken care of by the male of the species. I would venture to guess your marital problems started around the time you decided to be a stay-at-home dad, and most likely your depression too. You are depressed because you are not doing what a man should be doing. You're being her doormat. She has lost all respect for you for your beta male reaction to her cheating, and being a SIHD doesn't help. The only small chance to save your marriage is to be willing to end it. 1. You exposed this to his wife yesterday. You exposed it to your family and her family. 2. You need to stop going to counseling with her. If she completely turns around later, fine. But not now, when she shows no remorse and is still pining for her other man. You shouldn't believe for a second that this has ended. 3. File for divorce now and implement the 180 to detach from her. Google it, or someone may provide a link here, and follow it to the letter. Keep her out of your bedroom and treat her like a roommate that you hardly know. 4. Separate your finances and formulate an exit strategy. 5. Then, have one sit-down discussion with her. Tell her you regret your initial reactions to her cheating and that you'll no longer go to counseling. That you'll no longer accept her lack of remorse, lack of transparency, and continuing contact with the other man. Let her know that you're filing for divorce. Then continue on with the 180 and stop talking to her unless necessary for your children. 6. Expect to divorce her. If she doesn't turn around, you will carry it through to the end. What does turn around mean? She immediately stops all contact with other man, including contact for work. She will send him a no-contact letter that you read and approve. After that, she will never talk to him, communicate with him, or see him again. She becomes completely transparent with all her communication devices and allows you to verify the no contact. She demonstrates with every action and every word that she is remorseful for what she has done. There will be no GNO and no communication with male friends. She will account for her time away from you and will willingly discuss the with you anytime. If you want more details, she will give them to you and be completely truthful. She will come clean about any other cheating. She will not blame shift and she will need to own what she did. Should she fail to do any of the above, you will carry through with the D if she appears to be coming around. Don't stop the process until you are absolutely sure. We can help you with that part. Honestly, it may be too late to save your marriage, but this is your best chance. She has got to understand what it feels like to lose her husband for cheating on him. Make no mistake, this is her fault, not yours. She is 100% responsible. If by some chance she does what she needs to do, then you can start counseling again and then you can work on the marriage. OP responds, 1. That's the big question for me right now. Biggest reason to do it is to destroy the OM's freedom to contact her. Plus I would want to know if I were her. I know this is not his first affair, though it is his most serious by far. 2. The only counseling was going to, or plan to go to, is really separation counseling. As in how to treat each other civilly and protect our children from our conflicts. Plus how to arrange splitting of childcare, etc. At this moment, couples counseling with the goal of R is not on the agenda. 3. She's already moved out of the bedroom as much as possible. We are trying to arrange it so she rarely if ever has to enter our bedroom. We'd like it if she didn't have to get a separate place, for the kids' sake, but that's still to be determined. 4. She's already written notes to herself that she wants to get her own checking account. She has no savings on her own outside of home equity, whereas I have a lot. My assets are protected, not community property. Remember that I can monitor pretty much all her electronic communications. Email, 3 accounts, text message, cell phone, home phone, work computer, etc. I would know if she were contacting him. For the last week, only 1 email, which was work-related. My WW, for all her newfound sociopath tendencies, is actually pretty guileless and naive. She doesn't like that I can spy on her, but she really does an awful job of hiding her secrets from me. Partially because prior to the affair she really had no secrets from me. I set up her office computers and set up her passwords and her password managers, etc. She has admitted that she knows that no matter what she does, she believes that I'll still be able to spy on her. That's what you get for marrying a hacker and security expert. Ironically, for almost every year of our marriage I have chipped in more to our combined income than she has. I have family assets that I've drawn from over the years. So, I guess I'm not your average stay-at-home dad, in that sense. One of the things she liked about me when we got married was that I was willing to be a stay-at-home dad. I have to admit I've been ambivalent about it over the years, though it is becoming more appealing as the kids have gotten older. My depression didn't really start until the 4th or 5th year of our marriage. And fortunately, I did nothing about it for a couple of years, and my WW didn't suggest anything either. She was the one to finally suggest I do something about 2 years ago. According to her, she had 2 things, back-to-back on 2 nights. The first one was with a guy she never talked to again. The second one was with the guy who would become the affair partner. She says she went looking for a one because she felt she needed reaffirmation of herself as a woman, and to experience physical and emotional intimacy without the pressure and sadness she associated with me. She said that the emotional intimacy that first night was far better than she had expected, even though they didn't have intercourse. She laid down some ground rules before each night. 1. They would spend the entire night in the same bed. 2. There would be no pressure for physical things. 3. They would both stay present the entire time. And 4. The next morning they would walk away with no regrets and no further contact. Apparently, she got exactly that the first night. The second night she said was actually less intimate, but physically more exciting. He broke her ground rule by asking if he could contact her later, and she broke her ground rule by agreeing. Thus, they started their journey towards a full-blown affair. Although not for a couple of weeks, I believe in total, after that first night, they managed to spend 5 nights total with each other. It would have been 7 if not for the other man getting sick at the last minute. Most of the affair was online, with lots and lots of teasing and foreplay leading up to their trysts. So, if we include the second ONS as part of the overall affair, then she had 1 ONS prior to the affair. She did mention that she had been tempted about 9 months prior, but it hadn't worked out. I actually tend to believe that's the extent of it. She really doesn't have much of any opportunities for ONSs or affairs. If she had a strictly online EA, it would have surprised me. I'm not sure about exposing the PIA to our families. There has never been a known incidence of infidelity in my family. If there was, no one's talking. Also, there's only been 3 divorces, ever. It's likely that exposure would poison any relationship with my family, which would kill any chance of our comments. Wife is an entitled, selfish, lying, deceitful and disrespectful person. There is nothing justifiable about her cheating, nothing. No matter how bad your marriage or what you think you did wrong, you now understand that she thinks nothing of lying to you and deceiving you. She does not respect you in any way. This marriage is over and has been over for some time. You need to recover your self-respect, which you seem to have lost big time. Get a job. Get independence from her. Don't even think of R at this stage. Don't waste money or time on MC gather and secure evidence, which I believe you have done. Lawyer up and protect yourself and custody to your kids. Do the 180. Do not leave but kick her out. The piece of crap has grown kids and doesn't care about his family now. However, expose far and wide. His wife, her family and friends, their employers. Not to just stop their affair but to also make them feel the repercussions of their actions. Blow this up, post online. Isolate yourself from any of her toxic friends. The only chance you have of getting her back on the right terms is if 2 things happen. Ironically, you are genuinely ready to walk away and lose her, not want her. And for her to be truly remorseful, that means to not only acknowledge and own the wrong she has done, but to proactively do all the heavy lifting to put it right. Basically, she has to hit rock bottom, which it doesn't appear she is going to do anytime soon. Even if she did, if you did your self-healing right, there is a strong chance that you will not want her back. Do not let having kids be the reason you try to stay together, or do not expose. Staying together in a miserable marriage is a lot more destructive to kids. You have to make yourself the best man and dad you can be, physically and emotionally. This, plus getting a job, will make you a lot more attractive to her and to other hotties out there. Take control of your life, expose this, and file for divorce ASAP. OP responds, I believe in the case of when a BS unexpectedly uncovers and is devastated by infidelity, as in my case. They would argue that the WS resolves their guilt at betraying and deceiving their BS and in being the kind of person that behaves so selfishly and hurts the person they believe they love by suddenly seeing their marriage in a suddenly more negative light, and their BS especially in a harshly more negative light. Suddenly the problems in the marriage were caused by some inherent defect in the BS, or their BS should have known how unhappy the WS was, and it's their fault for being so blind, etc. etc. That is essentially what my WS has been arguing. My initial question, which hasn't really been answered, and maybe can't really be answered here, is how much of this suddenly pessimistic view of me and our marriage is caused by cognitive dissonance, and how much of it is caused by affair fog, or her being in love or in lust with the AP. I know there is a good deal of the latter, as evidenced by my WS hostility and anger at me for throwing a wrench into what she believed in her addled mind was a healthy, emotionally intimate relationship, as opposed to our dysfunctional and emotionally disconnected one. I actually agree with her view of our physical relationship, but obviously see her affair as fundamentally dishonest, fantastical, and destructive. I would think that exposure may help clear the affair fog, but not change the cognitive dissonance resolution distorting her memories and opinions of me and our marriage. Comments. Stop analyzing her. She cheated on you and she's not remorseful. For now, that's all you need to know. We've given you a tried and true blueprint that will give you the best chance for a successful outcome, whether it be R or D. Use it. OP responds, as I said earlier, my WW is pretty guileless, and really got in over her head when she started having to hide things from me. Once I was tipped off, it wasn't much of a contest. Her AP is more careful, but not enough to make up for her. Having all this surveillance can be a double-edged sword, however. Knowing the truth and having to watch your spouse lie repeatedly to your face is definitely eye-opening but also truly depressing. I told my WW that the feeling I had most towards her was dismay at how far she had fallen morally in my eyes and, eventually, in her own. It's as if her AP was a magnet, and her moral compass couldn't point anywhere else. I did, however, get one big benefit. By watching her carefully and observing when she was lying, which I knew ahead of time, I was able to detect her tell. As they say in poker, now I can tell if she's lying just from observing her carefully when she's talking. That's a pretty valuable advantage. As far as I'm concerned, one I don't think I would have been able to get any other way. Remember that she admits going out with the expressed intent of having ONS, before she had even met her IP. So, she had already justified her need for ONS and the physical intimacy that accompanied it. In her mind, her having ONSs, starting at the end of February, beginning of March, was to help tide her over until I was well and whole again and intimacy with me wasn't so uncomfortable or psychically painful to her. She had 2 ONSs then, and when she came back from that trip, She didn't talk about the ONSs. Obviously. But she did come out and say that she had suddenly come to the realization that she had been avoiding intimacy with me for some time because she found it too painful to see me depressed and overweight. That was the first time I think she had been even close to honest about our relationship, and was ironically when she began her deceit about the ONSs and the later affair. I took her admission to heart and redoubled my efforts to get better, which, to a great extent, I did by the time D-Day rolled around. Too bad that effort, while not wasted as it was for my own benefit more than anything, came too late to rescue our marriage. Her belief that having those initial ONSs and her idea that having these every so often during the year was allowing her to stay in the marriage and wait it out until I was better, was of course completely contradicted by her love affair with ONS number 2, Aka. Her IP, as she explained to her IP a couple of weeks into the affair. It has been very strange for me to realize that you are exactly what I've been searching for. Wow. And it's so amazing that there you were right on the very day that I was ready. Even stranger is that I was only looking for a night of physical intimacy with new and whole man. I always wanted someone in my life that I could tell anything to and have it been reciprocal. But I didn't realize that I needed that with physical intimacy. I can't think of anything I would want more in this moment than to make love to you. So, the physical intimacy, or, let's face it, intimacy, was something she sought out. The emotional intimacy was what surprised her. Although I don't know why it should have. The affair fog at that point was in full effect, because by being in it she had overstepped her own ground rules, as twisted as they already were. A few days later she wrote, before I got quite so emotionally involved, which probably negates all hope of me being able to have an unbiased opinion. I knew that you were an outstanding lover. For a moment today, I actually wondered why I had bothered with the whole search for intimate one-night stands. That's really unlike me because I've never regretted any decision to be physically intimate with anyone. But the problem is more about you, sort of like how a tricycle is really cool until you ride a bike. The cognitive dissonance resolution at this point was her unquestioning belief that she would never get caught. So she wasn't really hurting me. She probably thought it was helping our marriage because without it she would have felt the need to leave. I told her later that that would have been preferable. At least it would have been honest, and she reluctantly agrees and regrets not leaving first. Of course, the fact that she wrote even later than this that she had no intention of leaving me and wondered why she ever would sort of contradicts her viewpoint today. Nothing like her written word to snap her reality back in place a bit. I think some of you all are going a bit overboard on the serial cheater and she's been cheating for years. Memes. I honestly don't think she was cheating on me for years, for the reason mentioned in the previous post, prior to a little over a year ago. She worked from home, telecommuting at first, then working from home as a solo attorney. Her opportunities for ONS were very small. When she did travel, up until 3 years ago she traveled with her father, who she worked for. Then for a couple of years she worked on starting her own firm from home and had no reason to travel. If her goal has been ONS, as it appears to be, then she really didn't have any chances to do that. She could, of course, have been having an online EA, but considering her opinions about her as told to her AP, an EA had never really appealed or even occurred to her prior to her PA. It had to start with the physical intimacy first. We're so far from our at this point it's hard to envision how such a scenario could happen. Right now, we're separating and going to counseling strictly to try and make that separation as smooth and conflict-free as possible for our kids' sake. Right now, my WS won't even talk about the issues surrounding and resulting from the she wants to minimize in-person interaction because it just causes emotional stress for her. I wonder why. She said yesterday that we should agree to a fixed length for the separation, after which we can reevaluate at that point if we can be around each other without hostility. And then maybe we could re-examine trying marital counseling that actually addresses the underlying issues and talks about her A. For me, no R is remotely possible until she convincingly expresses real remorse to me, is willing to do whatever it takes to help restore trust in our relationship, and actually convinces me that she loves me. To date, none of this is happening at all. I know that she is meeting next week with a divorce attorney who was recommended by our former MC. Although she hasn't bothered to tell me about this meeting yet. I'm in contact with one as well, although I've neglected to tell her about that either. So no, I'm not ready to R, or accept an offer for R from her. A better question is whether she's ready to file for D, or accept without contest my filing for D listing her adultery as the justification for the D. My questions in this story have to do with her attitude and state of mind at this point. Her complete lack of remorse or interest in doing anything to reestablish trust. Her frankly sociopath new personality seems so out of character for her that I just wonder if it is sustainable or even permanent. Personally, I think it's all a defensive coping mechanism for her. And at this point she's frankly being an emotional coward with respect to our relationship. She'd rather play the part of the heartless piece of crap and run away than face her pain or mine. As to the trial separation, I agree that I don't get much out of it at all. And I've told my WW as much. I'd never agree to an indefinite trial separation or cohabitation arrangement either. That's just negotiated limbo. As far as I'm concerned, exposing the to the OMW should help prevent further encounters with the OM, who is, I remind you, living 15 or so miles away, as my WW and I would be living under the same roof, but different rooms. No dating or other relationships would be tolerated or likely to happen at home. Considering my surveillance, which will continue as long as she does nothing to restore trust. So not exactly unabated, any trial separation, as far as I'm concerned, would have to be limited to no more than a couple of months for me to agree to it. A week later update. We had our first MC session with the new counselor. She seems a lot more neutral than the last one, and my WW seems okay with her as well. And fortunately, starting over again with a new counselor necessitates that introductory period of summarizing where we stand and what we want, which took up the entirety of our first session. We're each going to have individual sessions with the counselor in a couple of days. I'm not putting too much hope into MC, but anyone would be preferable to the last MC. So far, trial separation, much as it is going smoothly. We're not having any conflicts about or in front of the kids, which was one of the motivations for MC. We did have a big argument the night of our first MC session. My WW came in my office and saw on my screen one of her more recent emails from the other man, along with a letter I was writing. The email referred to the internal politics of a continuing legal education school and showed how her IP pulled rank and got my WW into a competitive program at the last minute. She got pissed, called me creepy for going through her email, which in this case had been open on her home computer at night when I walked by it a week ago, and said this really just made her want to get separate residences and file for a legal separation. I told her that first of all, there is no such thing as a legal separation in our state. Secondly, I was feeling similarly and was strongly tempted to file for divorce now, because this separation thing was just negotiated limbo, and that I found limbo to be intolerable to me for any length of time, let alone an indeterminate length of time. As you might expect, this caused her to back off on her threats and hostility. She asked who the letter was to and I said I wouldn't tell her. I did reassure her that it was not to the school, or to any lawyer or legal organization. She then said we shouldn't be having this kind of hostile argument because it just made things worse, and we should save it for counseling. I told her I agreed, but that our next joint MC session, likely 2 weeks away, seemed like forever to wait on issues. I told her that I couldn't stand this limbo thing for long, certainly no more than a month or two, unless I felt it was contributing towards some progress in resolving our relationship. I didn't think her demand for separation was constructive because it was motivated by her desire to avoid me and avoid the emotional stress being near me caused her. I told her I thought her wanting to stay away from me, her professed happiness at minimizing contact, was just her cowardly, fearful response to her emotional stress that she would rather run away from unexamined than face up to, learn to understand, and resolve. I then said that in my opinion, the emotional stress she felt when around me wasn't caused by her perceiving my hostility towards her, at least most of the time, but by her unresolved guilt or shame at hurting me. I then said, at least I hope it's that, because if there wasn't any guilt or shame inside her then she'd suddenly become a sociopath. She then said quietly that of course there's guilt. I said that was very reassuring, but I didn't press her on that point. She left my office then and I got back to work. An hour later she came back and wanted to talk again, so we relocated to Outmaster BR to keep the kids from hearing. She then said that due to our continuing hostility, maybe we should think about not going on the other's family vacation. I said that first of all, her not going to see my family in a couple of weeks was a much bigger deal than seeing her father the following weekend at a resort an hour's drive from home, because visiting my family with the kids was an arduous and expensive ordeal with both of us going, but was an epic ordeal with only one parent going. We already paid a lot for her plane ticket, and my family is expecting her to be there. That brought up my second point, which was that if I flew up there with our kids and without her, there was no chance I wouldn't talk about our marital problems with them, including her with my parents. She seemed to accept that but grumbled that all I would mention would be her and not her list of complaints about me compiled at just before and just after D-Day. She then said that if I did that it would poison my family against hers, just as if when she told her family, they would defend her and hate me. I said that I actually was strongly considering telling her family too, and that if I told my family I would in all likelihood tell her family as well. I then added that she shouldn't be so sure her family would defend her actions. Right now, she seems to think that our problems pre-A, or more specifically the things I did which hurt her, though she didn't say so at the time, were at some level equivalent to the betrayal of her ex. She actually said that I had betrayed her or betrayed our marriage by not being an equal partner with her due to my depression, and not getting better, or trying to get better fast enough. I told her that was bullcrap, that depression wasn't a choice I made, whereas her A, and the deceit and manipulation that accompanied it, were most definitely her choice, when other, more honorable choices were always available. I said that from the outside, few people, aside from other cheating spouses, would sympathize with her view or equivocate anything I did with her adultery. I'm not sure if she believed me, but she didn't argue my point either. When I brought up divorce again and me filing first, she said that I must therefore want a contentious divorce. I said of course I didn't want that unlike her parents I had no desire to have a custom battle. She said she thought it would be better to have a collaborative divorce, where we use the same attorney. I said that would be cheaper, but I wasn't sure about agreeing on an attorney. I know she is meeting one for an initial consult on Thursday, and she still denies contacting one at all. I didn't mention to her that a collaborative divorce precludes me filing for divorce citing infidelity, which, from what I have read, has no effect on custody. Fine by me, but, if proven, and I have proof in spades, can likely affect the division of assets. She was going out of town the next day, and the issue of trust and surveillance came up. She told me she is convinced that she has no privacy, and that the fact that I hadn't expressed concern that she was going to meet up with her AP was proof that I was spying on her, and that she didn't trust me not to spy on her. I said that first of all, she had given me no reason to trust her, so I felt justified in my surveillance. Then I said that no, I didn't know one way or the other if she was planning meeting her AP, although I hadn't seen any evidence to support it, but that I hadn't expressed concern because at this point, I was starting not to care about the IP. I was feeling pretty pessimistic about our marriage at that point, so I offered to go ahead and file for divorce, or at least start the process. The next day, she then got a little skittish and said that we should wait and talk about this in counseling. I reiterated that it was too long to wait, that I couldn't stand the present circumstances for 2 weeks. She then asked if maybe we could schedule a session together for later the same week as our IC sessions, and I agreed to try and book it. She really didn't want me filing for D while she was out of town. I reluctantly agreed to hold off on filing until tomorrow, Monday the 23rd. In all honesty, I have some questions about the filing process that I needed to talk to an attorney about first anyways. I plan to do that tomorrow. As to the letter my WW wife saw me writing, you can probably guess the targeted recipient. The other men's wife. I finished the letter. Not short, about 3,000 words, and printed out the evidence I thought most appropriate to give her. It makes a pretty substantial pile of paper. I've been thinking about the best way to ensure she gets the package. I've decided to hire a local PI to find her and personally give it to her when her the AP is not around. I can't find any info on where she works or if she works, but I have her home number confirmed and her home address, so this shouldn't be too expensive. And knowing that she'll get it without her around is worth the extra expense. I found a local PI and I'm calling them tomorrow. That's about it for now. It should be an interesting week ahead. The difference right now is that she wants the separation because she says it makes her feel better about me. The more time she spends without me, with or without anyone else, the better she feels towards me, which I interpret to mean less hostile. I feel the opposite in that this weird dance of avoidance within the same house to coordinate childcare while avoiding any meaningful discussion of our issues is just making me feel more frustrated and hostile and more inclined to go the D route. When I told her this, that I was not going to be patient with this separation thing while I felt little progress was being made on resolving our issues, or at least it's so slow as to seem static, she again said this is why we're in counseling, and the decision about whether separation will work or not needs to be made there. I told her that no, the decision about whether separation and counseling are working for me is mine to make. I did agree that talking about this directly with her was not being productive, that we were not going to agree and arguing just increased hostility without getting any closer to resolution. Tonight, she said she had decided that she was okay with going with me and the kids to visit my family, mainly to support me because she knows how hard that trip can be alone. Well, actually she doesn't know. She's only heard how hard it is for me when I've done it in the past. I probably should have just been grateful, and I am, but I couldn't help mentioning that her willingness to come along was understandable considering the fact that if she were not to come, I would have to explain her absence, which would mean talking about her and her attitude since D-Day with my family. She asked, well, couldn't you say that we're having marital problems? I said that of course I could say that, but then I would be asked why we're having problems. And Thea would be first on my list of problems. She then said, "You could say it's because I don't love you anymore." I couldn't believe that she honestly would expect me to say that and not mention the A. That she thought it was reasonable to ask me to lie to my family to protect her from the judgment of my family. After all the misery she's heaped on me in the last 7 weeks. I said that if that were true, why go through all this counseling and separation crap? I could just file for D tomorrow and save us a lot of time, money, and misery. She changed the subject then and never answered that question. When we were coordinating our week for childcare this evening, my WW again pointed out that I was a stay-at-home dad. So of course I should be handling most of the childcare. I then pointed out that under the present circumstances, I really couldn't be a stay-at-home dad anymore. Or at least it would be irresponsible to myself to assume I will be able to continue being one. She looked puzzled and asked why. I told her that there was only one possible scenario where I could continue being a stay-at-home dad. Namely a real R. I then asked her what was the likelihood of that happening at this point. She said she didn't know, but that was the goal of separation and counseling, to see if we are capable and willing to give each other what we need to reconcile and be happy together. I asked her to give me a ballpark figure, and she deflected that question and changed the subject. I said that I had very serious doubts that she was willing to give me what I needed to restore trust and be happy in our marriage. She cut me off at this and said, again, that this was the kind of issue best discussed in MC. Every serious question I have apparently has to wait for counseling. I think I see a pattern. Perhaps we can do MC 3 to 4 times a week and speed this process along. In our state, custody is usually not influenced by infidelity one way or the other. I think we both agree that joint custody would be the likely outcome, and we both are okay with that. Spousal support, like alimony, is not an issue as I am not eligible for it. In terms of division of assets, infidelity, if proven, can affect how assets are split, with the betrayed spouse given a larger share. I'm not sure if infidelity can only be alleged in the petitioner's filing, or if it can also be alleged in the respondent's answer. If it is the former, or if alleging it in response is not as effective, then who files first makes a real difference. That's one of the questions I need to get answered ASAP. I do know that I have bits of very dirty proof of the affair, while her allegations that she thinks somehow excuse or justify it, and what really does that anyways, are not provable and are both factually disputed and questionably significant even if not disputed. My WW thinks me getting my own attorney means that I want a vicious, contentious divorce, and that I would be looking to exact revenge through the divorce. She wants a collaborative divorce, if either of us decide on divorce, using one attorney and filing a no-fault divorce. There is something to her claim. A non-collaborative divorce, a disputed divorce, will be more contentious and more expensive and will be harder on our kids. I can't help thinking, though, that a collaborative divorce would also help her get an even split of assets and avoid having her affair become a matter of public record. Damn, this loss of trust thing really is insidious, isn't it? My comment: this guy might be the biggest doormat I have seen. As in, he's just all talk, no actions. He can say whatever he wants, but his actions do not match his mouth. You guys agree? Comment down below, sub and bell, check out the recent stories, and I will see